guys take a moment to turn off your cell phones? Would you guys be lost without your phones? When we see Apple products, it is just a normal thing for us. But when Apple first became a company, people were very amused. As technology is changing, it is more convenient for all of us to have these products. I can personally say that I spend way too much time on my electronics. I rely way too much on technology. As a man of simple means and a background creates an empire and leaves a lasting impact on the world. You're going to hear about Steve Jobs, his background, his Apple company, and his depleting health. In Romaine Scott's article, Short Bio, 2012, he shares that on February 24, 1955, Steve was born. He was born in San Francisco, California. His parents weren't married at the time, so they chose to put him up for adoption. Paul and Clara Jobs adopted him, and they moved to Mountain View. In the neighborhood that Steve grew up in, there were many engineers that worked on electronics. When Steve was 13, he met Wozniak, who was 18 years old, and loved electronics. Steve and Wozniak would build many gadgets together. Steve attended school in California at Homestead High School. He also attended college in Oregon at Reed College for only one semester when he realized he had different interests. Steve moved back to California after a few months. He then got a job at Atari, which was for young video game makers. Steve saved up his money to go on a trip to India to search for enlightenment. When he returned, he started to work at Atari again. When he got back, Wozniak was working there on a computer. Steve was very interested in Wozniak's computer and thought that they could sell the software to hobbyists. They kept making the Apple computer boards. On April 1st, 1976, the first Apple computer was finished. Steve and Wozniak began making the Apple II computer. They both knew that it was going to be successful. When Steve was able to convince Mike to invest $2,500 into Apple, the Apple II computers were a huge hit. The sales made the founders millionaires. By the time Steve was 25, he had a net worth of over $200 million. In August of 1981, the IBM PC became a huge threat to Apple. Steve ended up resigning, but then he got accepted as Apple's CEO on September 16, 1997. When he got back, he introduced the iMac in May of 1998. People started to believe in his abilities. iBooks were also being made at this time. The next item he released was the iPod, which was a music player. And then in July of 2002, they introduced the first Windows iPod. The invention of the iTunes Music Store was introduced in April 2003. After Steve had made a deal with the record labels, the iTunes Store could sell over 1 million songs within the first week. Then in October 2003, iTunes introduced the iPod Mini, iPod Shuffle, iPod Nano, and iPod Video. By this time, iTunes had sold over billions of dollars in songs. The first iPhone was introduced in 2007. The first iPad was also released then too. iTunes later became an app store for an easy and legal way to download music and ringtones. Apple has many devices and has also led to the creation of more new apps for society to use. In Minda Zetland's article, Steve Jobs was a master at looking into the future, You Can Be Too, 2015. Steve was creating devices that he wanted to please people with. He imagined listening to music on a device that could fit into a person's pocket. He imagined listening to the music on something smaller than a lunchbox. He knew that people would enjoy having laptops that were smaller and lighter, and then he wanted to make the iPod, which was a smaller version of a CD player. Steve liked the idea of new and simple technology. It was easier for customers, and they were satisfied. While Steve was making new devices, he had to be able to see what features people liked and which frustrated the people. That way, he was creating a better device for them. He would ask around and see what kind of products others would like to see. He was then diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2003. Steve didn't want to have surgery, but he insisted on changing his diet. In 2005, he talked about how he was cured from his cancer. In June 2008, he gave a speech at the WWDC keynote, and then he resigned from his job. He had a liver transplant and seemed to be very healthy. He then went back to work. He couldn't wait to make finishing touches on products. He created the iPad 2, the iOS, and iCloud. And the iCloud is a place where you can store emails and documents and other kinds of media. According to a Romain Moisak's article, Short Bio, 2012, Steve hired the dean of Yale School of Management so that Apple could go on without him. Steve began to prepare for his death in multiple ways. On October 5th, 2011, he passed away at his job in Palo Alto, California. According to Nicholas Carlson's article, months before he died, Steve Jobs believed he would live for years as Apple's former CEO, 2012. Some people would have thought that the company would have died after him, but it is now up and running at a very good rate. As a man of simple means and a background, created an empire and a lasting impact on the world, Steve Jobs had always loved experimenting with new electronic devices, which helped him create the Apple company. His depleting health caused his death, but Apple is on the rise. Have you ever thought what you would do without technology? It seems like some people rely on technology way more than they should.